So there's this whole notion of a fast. The decision to stop doing something for a while that you normally do, eating, drinking, binge watching stuff, being on the internet. We can fast from a lot of different things. And there's a physiological effect to fasting, especially if you're fasting from food or consuming things physically. But no matter what you're fasting from, there's also this other thing that happens, which is that you have the opportunity to engage with the automatic behaviors that you're engaged in a different way. They become more center stage, more noticeable. So you might have a kind of impulse to do things, and you're not quite aware when you're doing it. Like, let's say you decide to stop eating chocolate, and then you go somewhere and they have chocolate there, and you're just like, without even thinking, you just kind of, oh, I love that. And you just grab it. And then depending on how in tune or awake or aware you are in that moment, you might not realize what you're doing until it's in your hand, until it's unwrapped, or maybe until it's in your mouth. And you're like, oh yeah, I was supposed to be doing something different here. I was supposed to be reacting differently to this thing. So in addition to the physiological effects of refraining from something or abstaining from something or choosing not to consume something, there's this other behavioral piece, which is really confronting. When you have an embodiment practice, when you have the normal daily regular practice of noticing your physical body, there's another deeper opportunity there to notice what is happening in the moment of reaching for that thing that you're habituated to consume or do. And that's what I want to talk about now. I just posted a video about what I learned from my sugar cravings. And this is kind of a part 2, which is kind of a prequel, because if I had planned this, which I didn't, if I had planned this, I might have talked about this first. I don't know if it really matters. It's all part of the same process, and it's not particularly linear. You might and I might have an awareness of certain things happening at certain times, but that doesn't mean the process itself is linear. But I wanted to talk too about the behavioral piece and the somatic awareness piece and the embodiment piece of what I'm learning from engaging with my sugar cravings. So if you didn't see the last video, I talked about the fact that for the past couple of months, I've been intentionally engaging with my sugar cravings. I remember writing an email to my brother 3 years ago in May of 2022. So actually it's now going on 4 years ago. But I wrote an email to my brother that said, if we put craving under a microscope, what would we see? And it was the beginning of an intentional inquiry that I had around this experience and mechanism of craving something. And I think there's also a relationship between craving and fasting, just conceptually, obviously also physiologically, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm not prepared to talk about that. But what I really want to talk about is the behavioral aspect, the experiential aspect, and the somatic aspects of engaging with these experiences. So when I decided to stop eating sugar, it was inside of a bigger decision to stop eating processed foods and just to engage with snacks and things in a bag, things that have been sitting on a shelf for months somewhere, to engage with those kinds of things differently and to shift my eating to fresh things, things that are in the produce section and meat, but things that are not in a bag, things that are not sealed up in a bag or a box. And so, or a bottle. And so I began to notice that when I was reaching for a sweet, sugary snack, I had a feeling in my body. That's the first thing I began to notice. I would describe the feeling in my body as squirmy and wriggly at times. And sometimes it was more of like a jittery, jangly, vibraty feeling. It was like a jittery, jangly feeling, like, like I could almost hear a jangly sound in my head, a loud, jangly sound when I would get this feeling, this craving for sugar. And to quiet that sensation, I would need to reach for something and eat it. To settle the squirmy, wriggly feeling, I would have to reach for something and eat it. That was one of the first things I noticed. Because I have an embodiment practice, that was one of the first things I noticed was, how do I feel in my body when this is happening? How do I feel in my body when this is happening? That was kind of my step one, because that would make sense, because I'm doing an embodiment practice every day where I just kind of notice what I'm sensing and feeling physically. And I notice the physicality of my experiences. So I said, oh, there's a kind of jittery, jangly, type of feeling. And I want that feeling to go away. So I'm reaching for the thing. The next piece of this for me as a person with an embodiment practice was being willing to feel that, which was really uncomfortable and continues to be, but not, as I said in the last video about sugar, the intensity level has dropped radically. So instead of the whole experience just kind of slamming on top of my head like an octopus and blinding me, it's just I'm engaging with the feelings and the experience in a much less intense way, so I can kind of be apart from it in a way. I can stand apart from it and observe it now, where before it just kind of hijacked everything and just took over. So I started to allow myself, just for, in my way, a few seconds at a time, to feel that jittery, jangly feeling, or to feel that kind of squirmy, wriggly feeling, like, ooh. And then there was a battle that ensued, because I wanted to soothe that physical feeling in my body. I wanted to soothe it by consuming sugar. And so what I started to do was let myself feel the feeling for a bit. Now, because I've been doing this practice for almost 5 years of feeling physical feelings, I could go beyond 10 seconds. I could go beyond 30 seconds. And there were a few times where I just sat with the feeling as a practice for like half an hour and just let it fry me. You know, it was like crackling bacon. You know, when the bacon is crackling in the pan, I could feel that happening to me. That's kind of what it was like metaphorically. And I went through that. And I had other things I did also to adjust and readjust to this experience of craving sugar. I talked in the last video about stumbling into the language of ERP and how useful that was to me conceptually. But what preceded all of that was this embodiment practice of feeling the feelings in my body that came up during the cravings. That was where it started, and it was a little bit of feeling around in the dark and just a kind of very humble willingness. And I've been talking about that a lot on my podcast since whenever episode 57 was, so I guess a year ago. The willingness to feel. That's my personal definition of embodiment. The willingness to feel. The willingness to notice your physical sensations. I went into this a couple months ago, end of January. I went into this believing that I could solve this. And there were a few days where I was like, I think my cravings are gone. Like, I think I did it. But what I noticed, and I was very humbled by this, what I noticed that it was more of like a nicotine patch where instead of smoking cigarettes, I transferred my behavior to a less injurious behavior, a less severe and harmful behavior. So I was eating fruit now. I still needed the sugar. It took a few weeks for me to understand that I was doing that because I had made a deal with myself. Okay, no processed foods, please. No artificial sugar, no juice, no soda. All of that was already radical enough for me. No trail mix, whatever. Okay. But surely I can have an apple. And that was, none of this is really prescriptive for anyone watching. And I know that food is a sensitive issue. And health is a sensitive issue. And blood chemistry is a very sensitive issue for those of us who track our we track our blood for one reason or another. I started tracking my blood chemistry because of autoimmune symptoms. So I understand that these are sensitive issues. But the reason I'm talking about it is that holding this sugar craving experience in an intentional way has helped me to, I don't even want to use the word understand because I'm not sure that that's true, but has helped me to begin to find language for what's happening with me. And it's deepened my engagement with my embodiment practice in a really useful, beautiful way. I'm holding all of this in gentle contemplation. The physicality, the conceptual, mental, meaning-making, the emotions that are all firing and engaging together in this process. Yeah, that's what I want to say. I began my somatic journey with Luis Mojica, who's coming out with a book soon. I forget what it's called. But he is the founder of Holistic Life Navigation and just an awesome human. And in his teaching space, I was introduced to Amber McZeal, Dr. Amber McZeal. This is 5 years ago. I talked about this in a very early video long ago, somewhere on this channel. And her work was where I was first introduced to the concept of decolonizing. And what I took away from it, which I still hold close, is it's the notion of being with instead of dominating. Being with instead of dominating. And that is so integral to an embodied way of living. So even though I went into this sugar craving adventure with this quiet desire to end it, to get rid of it, to get rid of the sugar craving and forever, what I'm learning very humbly and what I'm being humbled by is this other possibility that I'm simply learning to live with it differently, to hold it differently, to engage with it differently, to be with it. Because sure, I got rid of the more harmful versions of sugar, and I'm noticing that the cravings have died down radically. But as I said in the last video, there's something beneath the craving. There's something triggering the craving, and that's still there. So yeah, instead of reaching for something that's a little more harsh to my blood chemistry and my body, I'll eat a fruit or I'll eat, some other starch and get the same chemical effect. But what I'm learning is, I'm still having to hold me. I'm still having to hold myself. I'm still having to engage with whatever that thing is that's beneath the craving, that's triggering the reaction. I may never know what that is, or I may find out 10 minutes from now, or it may be something on a Tuesday and another thing on a Thursday. So ultimately, this process is inviting me back towards myself and to be with myself and to hold myself. Not to root out all the problems one by one by one, but to be with myself and to let the being with be the ecosystem that gives rise to other experiences and conditions and ways of being. So my sugar cravings are pulling me into other aspects of myself. At first it was like, gotta stop it, gotta fix it, gotta get rid of it. And that's often where I start with things, right? To be fair. But in the context of embodiment and through the lens of somatic awareness, there's another form of being and reality that inevitably arises, which is a more subtle way of orienting and positioning myself in relation to that thing. So it's not rooting it out and getting rid of it forever. It's discovering that I'm not it, noticing that I have a relationship to it, noticing that I can witness it, back to the work of Michael Singer, noticing that I am not it, I am witnessing it. And then through that process, there is a kind of organic shift that begins to occur. That's all I can say about it for now. And that's probably enough, as I've been talking for a long time. But I wanted to use this experience that I'm having with sugar to share what I'm learning and feeling and thinking about embodiment and somatic awareness and being alive and being a human in a body. So if we haven't met before, my name is Bridget. I am the host of Thriving in Plain Sight, a podcast where every week we do an embodiment practice right in the episode. Thank you for being with me today, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.